for liftoff in T-30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.
Hey, thanks for stopping by Minnesota Black Robe Regiment for another episode of TC and Friends Monday Night Musings. I don't know if my guest tonight's going to want to be lumped into the category of my friend after having to walk me through how to restream to his channel on YouTube. I am a Luddite at best when it comes to technology. It's really funny. People are like, man, you seem to do all these videos. You're really good at it. And I'm like, yeah, StreamYard walks me through it all. I'm a moron. So, yeah. So you guys are in for a treat tonight. I'm Andrew Wilson from the Crucible channel. That is a debate channel on YouTube, and they claim to be the fastest growing debate channel on YouTube. And from the content that I've seen, I could see why, because there has been a lot of very interesting content on their channel, and I have seen some train wrecks of interactions with a few people who do not know how to handle pushback. And it's not Andrew that has a problem with that. I'll tell you that. But I'll give them credit for at least one thing, if not more. But we'll give them credit for at least one thing. They do not have a problem platforming dissent, and I guess that's what a debate is all about, right? You platform dissent because it's incredibly important for people to be able to hear the other side. And one of my favorite approaches to dissent is steel manning your opponent's argument. More often than not, I have to steel man, straw man, and burn both of them down because I can't ever get anybody who disagrees with me to come on the channel. I'm not big enough, or I must be just scary, intimidating. That's not true. But anyway, just a reminder, folks, if you haven't been doing so, you can track the story that I've been telling about my friends Bob and Sue and their son Garrett, who is a Ranger veteran, and Bob is a United States Army Special Forces veteran. He and his son both served during this war on terror that we have been fighting. And Garrett was hit by a vehicle on a road on Monday night in Reston, Virginia last week. He's in very critical condition. He's still being sedated, and I will have a link to his carrying bridge in the description of this video after it posts. And I'm going to be working out, trying to find a way to see if we can help them recoup some of the costs of Bob being at Garrett's bedside while Sue has to stay back here and literally hold the farm together. And so just whether you're a praying person or not, please be thinking about these two veterans and what they're going through, and be paying attention in days and weeks to come. We're going to be doing a lot of conversation about vets and how the United States regime treats veterans after they've used them up and thrown them away. And also another reminder, I have a fundraiser going on for my friend Dana Stevens. Some of you might remember her interview talking about how her mom passed away from the COOF and the COOF protocols. Dana is preparing to take on the system, the medical industrial complex, and she's trying to raise some money for a probate attorney. And so we are here, I am matching, well, I wouldn't say matching. I'm encouraging my followers, my subscribers and whatnot to go to Dana's Give Send Go. There again, the link will be in the description of this video later. so that she can raise money to pay for a retainer for a probate attorney. It's all she needs. It's $3,000. We're trying to get her there by the end of January. If you go directly to Dana and you give her up to $100 or more between now and the end of January, I'll give you a $15 credit towards merchandise, whether it be mugs or even a bag of coffee, my coffee. I'll give you $15 credit towards that. And anything I sell between now and the end of January, 15% of those proceeds, my Subscribe Star income, my YouTube earnings, and anything that I sell will go to 15% of that will go to Dana to help her raise that money. And on Thursday, Dana and I will be sitting down and recording our very first episode. And thanks, Sue. That's great. I'm scared. I'm just going to put that up there for a while before I bring Andrew in. So, well, you are scary. Yes, I am. Dana will be joining me as a co-host on a new series we're going to be doing exclusively to Rumble to talk about COOF protocols. And part of that series is going to be addressing the Veterans Administration and exactly what they have done to collude with certain agencies when it comes to COOF protocols. So be paying attention to Sue and Bob and Garrett's story, and also be going over and checking out things with Dana. To everybody over at my Subscribe Star, thank you very much for being part of that and continue to help, because that does keep me on the air. Because, quite frankly, it just helps keep the internet on. And the internet's not cheap anymore either. I remember when it was a lot cheaper than it is now. So without any further ado, we are going to bring Andrew in and say hello. Andrew, thank you for making yourself available tonight. I know you guys have been doing at least 750 debates every day for the last 2 weeks at least. So so who is Andrew Wilson, and how in the world did he decide to start a debate channel on YouTube, and exactly when and why?
Yeah, so thanks for having me. Yeah, my name is Andrew Wilson. I am the owner and proprietor of the Crucible, which you did get right. It is the fastest growing debate platform
I
on
just
YouTube.
took you at the word, bro.
Yeah. The reason it is because really there's only two, right? So that's why. But anyway, I got into it by pure accident. So I was I did debates on another channel that was started on Facebook, and that grew on YouTube. We had a parting of ways, and then I started the Crucible and kept the essence of that channel intact. And it's just grown and grown and grown from there. We have high profile debates, low profile debates. Some of the low profile are my favorites. So we're going to continue to do that. And in the foreseeable future, that's the primary content that you'll see, though I do a lot of political commentary, and I also do trash talk extravaganzas where I take the absurdity of the world and shit all over it for my own personal amusement.
Yes. You know what? I think that's just amusing for everybody in general.
Yeah, I think it's good for everybody. I agree.
Nothing like laughing at the reductio ad absurdum. I mean, I just go for it. And I just throw that terminology out there, and people are going to be what? What is that? I don't understand. So you are a self-described paleo-conservative Christian, and I if I'm tracking with you and your other half, you guys, do you come from more of an Orthodox background?
No, my wife was raised as a Baptist Christian or Calvinist, and
we're okay with that. I'm a Reformed Calvinist. So.
Oh no. Well, now you opened up a can of worms that we're going to have.
No, we're not debating. We're having a conversation.
So anyway, I was raised as a non-denominational Christian, but my parents put their faith first and foremost in our household. So we're Johnny come latelys to Orthodoxy. We've been Orthodox for about 2 years. We made the conversion about 2 years ago.
Are you more the Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox? What's your
Antiochian is where we focus our efforts, and it's because they have the best food. I'm not gonna lie.
Is it just pick it? You know,
Why, like, why is
it-
that not a good deciding factor? It makes me so angry. It's like,
no, I get
okay,
it.
it's like, why shouldn't that be the deciding factor? Like, if you're going to be in a liturgy for 3 hours, right?
You're gonna need some
and you
good
have
food
to
at
fast.
the
You have
end.
to fast the whole morning, right?
Yeah.
So you can't, you can't take communion if you haven't fasted. It's like the church that gives you the best food, obviously, is going to be the one where you're like, you hang your hat, right? So this is my thought process behind
I
it.
get totally. Well, it's funny. Of Buck Johnson, Counterflow.
No,
Buck was kind of he's a drummer. He's played drums for events for Ron Paul with some other big musicians, and I had Buck on. And Buck is a recent catechumen for into Orthodoxy, and now I'm being exposed to all these other Orthodox people, which is exactly how I found Rachel. And so I had reached out to her first to ask her to come on to talk about her research into feminism and first, second, and third wave and all that. And they're like, well, Andrew's got a pretty solid thing going on. I guess I better talk to him too. And I've been kind of watching Rachel, especially, has been kind of going, shall we say, going ham for the last couple of weeks on Protestants. And I've just sat back and watched because I love the conversations. I love watching it. But I was exposed to Orthodoxy. Really, my first taste of it was from Buck, which is how then I'm ended up connecting with you guys, and so it's been very interesting to me to watch the resurgence, and I don't know, maybe you guys wouldn't title it that way, but I've been watching this resurgence of Orthodoxy in modern America in younger generations, because oftentimes it's you talk to people and they kind of have this stuffy view of it as being this old world religion that really only appeals to people with these strong European ties, and I'm like, it's really kind of making a resurgence in the U.S. and it's
well, it's
really
making its emergence, really.
well, yeah. I think emergence is probably even a better term.
It's because of the gays.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's because of the gays. So
What?
the problem is that degeneracy runs rampant. When degeneracy runs rampant, people look to the past. They look to past generations who had a handle on the degeneracy of their societies. And when we look to the past for the degeneracy in societies, we find out that most of the modern degeneracy comes from the original schism and the Enlightenment document that is the U.S. Constitution. So
You were just going to get it all out.
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
away.
So this is the big problem, and why you see this emergence happen is because the degeneracy is so widespread in the United States that as people look to the past, what do they find? They find out that, oh, the original Christian church was hidden from us. The original Christian church and what original Christians actually wanted as a society, this was all hidden from us. This was out of our sight, and Satan has literally blinded people from it. And this is what we've gotten with Enlightenment and Protestantism, is now we have rampant degeneracy everywhere. So of course, as society begins to crumble, people always the trend has been they look to the past for answers because they can't look to the future. The future looks bleak.
What do you say to the person that's looking at the past for answers? And I don't disagree with that. And they're trying to determine between Roman Catholicism and and so I'll give you a really good example. Monica Perez, Roman Catholic, met her, connected with her through Buck, who is Orthodox, and they're trying to look, and they're going, okay, well, you say look to the past. Well, why not Roman Catholic versus Orthodox?
Well, there's a lot of apologetic arguments for why they should go down the Orthodox pathway. One of which that I can think of off the top of my head is that the Catholic big hats do recognize Orthodoxy as being legitimate. We just do not recognize them as being legitimate. But the most important thing to understand is that even if a person reforms to Roman Catholicism, it's far superior to the alternative of real good, feel good, buddy Christ.
Which I do want you to understand. I patently reject feel good Christianity. So
Yeah, well, I mean,
yeah.
but that's the problem, is that the Protestant religion in and of itself is no protection from being infiltrated by Enlightenment principles. It embraces them. And that's the trend that we've seen in the United States, is the Enlightenment principles have essentially taken over people's faculties of reason. And this is
I
why
agree.
we see widespread degeneracy everywhere. You have to understand that most Protestant churches globally, not just in the United States, have been completely infiltrated by the LGBTQ community. They come in with bags of money and pay them to train their staff and clergy how to better treat their homosexual congregants, to get them the affirmation care that they need. So this is, they call it a win-win, but it's actually a massive bribery system that's done by about 4 different organizations. And these organizations are widespread. They're funded by all the same players you would think that they would be funded by. Everybody from the Rockefellers to even the Gates Foundation funds some of this. But the pro-LGBTQ propaganda and money bags that have come through that fund these organizations is horrific. And then it all trickles down. They have, now you can look all this information up. Most of these groups have an actual outreach. Most LGBTQ groups, if you look them up online, they actually will give you like a portfolio document that explains where their money is going. Outreach to churches is a huge swath of that budget. And it's not outreach to churches, it's infiltration of their messaging.
So let me ask this, because I platform people who would be deemed outside of the norm socially by here, and I'll throw it out here, and I'm in not in a debate way. When you look at people like, let's say, an R.C. Sproul, who from the Reformed tradition is probably one of the most stalwart, hold the line type Reformed Christians. He really fought against a lot of, and to the point where he was attacked quite a bit. But you look at a guy like R.C. Sproul or Steve Lawson or some of these others who are actually stalwart thinkers, logical, philosophical. They embrace philosophy. They reject the esoteric nature of and kind of the feel whatever you want to feel mentality of the Enlightenment, while it's still remaining within that Reformed camp. And so I platform people like that, but I also platform people who are outside of the norm from your view and the Reformed view, who are gays or atheists, who are also seeing a lot of what you're talking about with that Marxist, Leninist, Gramscian social Marxism of the LGBTQ movement. And they've walked away from it as homosexuals or atheists and are saying, look, you guys are absolutely right. We may not agree on some things, but we see the Marxist influence here and we're going to talk against it. How do you reach, individuals like that?
Well,
And
so to kind of answer this directly, because there's two kind of questions there. The first is, when you're talking about Protestants who have been holding the line on the culture war, they have done this successfully in the past. And for that, I'm very thankful. There are tons of great Protestant people out there, many of which I'm friends with. I was one myself. The Orthodox don't reject Protestants and say that they don't know God. That would be absurd, right? We're just trying to lead people towards the original Church of Christ. Now, that said, understand that while these people could be in alliance with us politically, they're not with us in alliance necessarily spiritually, right? But from a political standpoint,
holding the line politically.
Yeah, but from a political standpoint, I'm very thankful that those people are there and they're doing their best to try to fight off the social contagion of degeneracy that we're now experiencing. The thing that you're talking about in reference to several homosexuals or transgenders who go against the grain and speak out about how bad it's become, these people are outliers. This is not.
They're
this
not
is
normative by any stretch of the
no,
imagination.
they're complete outliers, and they're not involved in any type of normative way, even in stopping any of this madness from happening. It's not going to be left up to some degenerates who claim that they're less degenerate than these other degenerates to solve the problem of degeneracy.
How do you, so like I have one particular friend, and like you said, you've got friends across the board, and you recognize differences, whether, especially theological differences, but how do you address the reality that some of these, and there again, one of my friends in particular, literally as a openly gay man, quotes the Bible when it comes to the evil, even addressing the evil of that particular movement. He quotes the Bible more than most Christian churches do.
Well,
And
to be completely blunt with you, sir, is he an active homosexual?
I have no idea if he's got partners or not, to be honest
Well,
with you.
if he's openly gay and an active homosexual, then he's a heretic. There's not. And
Well,
that's
no,
why you're
no,
not-
he doesn't claim to be Christian by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay, gotcha.
He just literally knows. He quotes scripture in reference to the evil, especially of the LGBTQ Marxist agenda, more than a lot of churches do, even Roman Catholic churches.
Mhm.
And that's been one of the encouragements that I have. I've been working on this process in my head, how I think,
why does he quote the Bible if he's not a Christian?
because he recognizes, and you and I both know this, because even non-believers recognize the truth of Scripture, and it's mind-blowing to me. And so, I see it on your face.
Well, yeah, well,
I'm
because if he-
presuppositional
Well,
in
yeah,
my
if he
apologetic. So,
well, if he recognized the truth of Scripture, he would be a Christian, right? That's the.
I don't know if I'd agree with you on that one. So, I'm
Yeah.
not saying that people don't rebel against the truth of Scripture. I'm just
Yeah.
saying they can recognize it, which is oftentimes leads to rebellion. But I bring him up more than anything to affirm what you're saying. Justin must be one of your friends or a regular follower of the channel. Says Andrew is about to unlock your brain, dude. I got news for you, Justin. My brain ran out of my skull years ago. After
We're gonna stuff it back in and unlock it anyway.
I promised Andrew this was not a debate. I'm not trying to debate. I'm literally trying to have a conversation. Justin,
Yeah.
You're not helping.
Yeah, well, we don't need it to be contentious, but
No, I don't.
I do want you to understand that my position on this.
No, I totally understand what you're saying. You're talking to a guy who's been to who's done open air preaching outside of gay pride events, and so that's a Protestant thing. It's been a while, but I think what we're dealing with is, and I see this on your guys' channel as well. Justin says, no contentions. Has he watched your channel? Has he?
Yeah, I think I've seen Justin MF a few times.
No, I
we have probably one of the better chats I think anywhere on the internet.
I love watching your guys' chat.
Yeah, they're a huge wide array of Protestants, Orthodox, even Roman Catholics. The big hats are there as well, right? Even the big hats are there.
Even the big hats.
So and they come in to watch spirited debates and to even argue amongst themselves. For that, we're very appreciative. We have a great support network.
Which is actually where I was going, is that one of the weaknesses of modern Protestant Christianity, I like to refer to it as Western Christian culture, is the absolute demand on their part to avoid all contention altogether. You can have no disagreement. You can have absolutely no arguments at all. And I'm like, excuse me. Have you guys not paid any attention to Paul at all in Acts 17? We've got this view of Paul in Acts 17 where he's walking up the hill to the Areopagus, right? And, and he gets up there and he unloads on all of these philosophers. And we in the Western mindset are picturing it as if Paul goes up there and says to them along the lines of, "Hey, I'm here to be your buddy, and I would like to tell you about a better way than what you have right now. But if you don't like it, that's okay." No, Paul literally went up there and dismantled their entire worldview.
Yeah, well, you're supposed to slay all arguments. The thing you have to understand, Orthodox doesn't have papal edicts. There is no pope. The entire church and the ecumenical councils were built around rigorous debate. Logic and reason are something that's ingratiated inside the very church structure and the air that we breathe. That's how things are done. It's why you see so many Orthodox who are in the realm of doing debate or Christian apologetics in general. The entire structure of it breathes and thrives within the arena of rigorous discussion and debate. That's what all of this was almost from the beginning. So, I completely understand it. The big hats, they don't have to worry so much because they have the Pope with the biggest hat, and he just says this, and then it shall be. Right?
You wouldn't possibly be talking about speaking ex cathedra, would you?
Be talking about, there's the papal edicts, which now are so insane that Catholics can't even figure out why they have a Pope. They're just the popes themselves have become far more rigorously degenerate than the populations they're supposed to serve.
Yeah, I've had that conversation with several of my Roman Catholic friends over recent years. So you opened the door right away. You just threw it out there, talking about the Enlightenment document, which I don't dispute on many levels. But the Enlightenment document of the Constitution of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And as a self-identified paleo conservative, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Were you always paleo-con, do you think? Or were you maybe more Mises level libertarian or more traditional conservative? Or
I would say that in my early years, I was 100% libertarian. Almost to the point of absurdity, Aleister Crowleyan style, do as thou wilt style libertarian. I have a lot of compassion for libertarians because the compatibility ideologically, they're not compatible with paleo conservatives at all. However, they'll let us exist, and almost no other ideology will, which is why I find myself not nearly as much at odds with libertarians as I am with almost every other political branch of philosophy that's out there.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been TC and Friends Monday Night Musings. Thanks for tuning in. That was perfect. Again, a friend of mine said, "I don't know what to make of you." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He says, "Some days I think you're a leftist, but I know you're not." And I'm like, "You clearly haven't been paying attention to me if you think I'm a leftist." I'm a constitutional originalist, and I know that you would take some issue with that because you have stated in the past that you see the Constitution as really an invalid document, and because it's based solely on Enlightenment philosophy. And I'm paraphrasing, so I'd love for you to correct that, but I know that you don't.
Yeah,
You don't see it the same. You have a very countercultural perspective on the Constitution compared to other paleo-cons.
Yeah, well,
Myself included.
So what's a conservative supposed to conserve?
Well, if you're a conservative, if you're a normie-con, by the way, I coined that phrase myself. If you're a normie-con in the United States today, especially in the Midwest or Upper Midwest, you are conserving whatever was popular 20 years ago.
Yeah, so I mean that's not good, right? That's just we're just Democrats from 20 years ago, right? That's not good. So
if you go far enough back, you're just a Republican from 30 years ago,
right?
So.
But this is what I mean is like, what are you supposed to conserve as a conservative? so this was the great question that I had. What are conservatives trying to conserve? Are they trying to
I
conserve?
agree 100%.
Yeah, they're trying to conserve culture. Are they trying to conserve racial demographics? What are they trying to conserve? What is it? What is the great conservation? And as you start to study it, you go down the primrose path and you figure out very quickly they're only trying to preserve one thing, and that's the golden thing and the only thing that matters, which is the Christian religion. That's truly what the conservatives are trying to conserve, is the conservation of religious value structures. The one thing that's being torn apart, torn to pieces, and this is the direct ramification on culture. If you want to see it go hand in hand, as people have dropped out of religion, the degeneracy has been on the rise in a scale that's almost in equilibrium with each other. The church is the ultimate conservation, which is why Orthodoxy is so appealing to conservatives, because they have not changed their tradition since inception. They have conserved it in its completeness. That's why it matters so much. Conservation of biblical value structures are the only thing that can make a society viable long term. Nothing else can. No human tradition can do it. No specific demographic can do it. Only these values can do it. Nothing else.
So when you look at conservatism, and you go back to kind of the father of the modern paleo-conservative movement, Edmund Burke. And there's some dispute there as to whether or not you could consider him that, but Burke kind of stepped into that role and kind of laid the groundwork for the ideology that became conservatism. Now, obviously, it was a English, British version of conservatism, but we look at other people who would be considered part of that. William Buckley, and I'm throwing out names that a lot of people wouldn't recognize, but if anybody pays attention to philosophy and politics, you've got a William Buckley who would be seen as that stuffy, interesting guy from New England with an interesting accent. They might differ with you on the perspective of the Constitution and its roots. Now, some people might chalk that up to, well, Andrew is paleo-con, but also Orthodox. So he's going to have a little bit of a different perspective on the Constitution than maybe someone who's Protestant and paleo-conservative. How do you look at that person who's maybe more of a Buckley-style paleo-conservative, constitutional originalist like myself, and say we can find some common ground, or is it possible for us to find common ground?
No, we can't. Listen, it's a radically progressive document, even for its time. It's radically progressive. It's not there's nothing conservative. Like, look, if you were to take the British Crown and compare it with the rebellion that happened in the United States against the British Crown to form the United States, who would you consider the conservatives?
Well, I listened to your conversation. Who was it you were talking about that with?
Maybe Rob Knorr?
Oh, I don't remember.
Heavyset fella?
I was listening and not watching.
Okay.
And I don't judge anybody on their fatness, because even though I'm 4.5 years removed from 300 pounds, I'm still fatness.
Right. Well, I'm just saying, I guess my overarching point here is that when you look at this, no, these were progressive values, progressive principles, even for the time.
And I don't dispute that it was progressive. But do you think there's room for them to in the throwback to, these are the natural rights of man? No?
No. Well, there's
go ahead.
Well, there's no natural rights. There are no natural rights. That's there is no justification for a natural right. None. They even had to preface this by understanding that the only justification that they could give for the right was what? God. That was the preference, right? They had to preface these rights by saying they came from the Almighty. That's how they were
Right.
able. So when you break this down, you recognize that there's nothing about nature that's involved in this at all. There's nothing natural about these rights whatsoever. And no, this progressive document that now look, I have some sympathy for the viewpoint of wanting to conserve the Constitution, its originality, but people don't really want to do that. They want to preserve basically what we have now in the Constitution, minus abortion. For instance, you wouldn't want to go back to a time when there was slavery, which the Constitution permitted. That would be bad, right? You wouldn't want to go back to women not being able to vote, which was in the Constitution. That would be bad. So they're not really. Oh, go ahead.
I might.
You might, right? But you would say probably for the vast majority of constitutional,
Just all of my friends, just a man.
yeah. But for constitutional originalists, they would not. So the thing is that and because this is a progressive document, it progressed exactly as you would think it would, and suddenly more amendments were added in order to add more protections, more egalitarianism, more equality, less in the way of hierarchical structures, less in the way of societal cohesion. And this is what that document brought us.
I would go so far back as to say I don't think you should be voting if you don't own property, but that's just me. That's
yeah, but I mean, regardless of the arbitrary metric that you base voting on, whether it's property, because then you say, well, now you have a stake in the game. I think that would be superior to what we have now, but it would be inferior to what we ought have ultimately.
So what, if you can answer it from an Orthodox perspective, and by your own admission, you're relatively new to the Orthodox perspective. In 2 years.
I can't answer on behalf of Orthodoxy.
No, I don't want you to answer on behalf of Orthodoxy. I want you to answer on behalf of yourself. When see, and this is why I love these kind of conversations, ladies and gentlemen. I'm looking around like ladies, like I've got a studio audience. What am I looking at over here? I don't even know. You must be monitoring the chat.
Yeah, I have 3 monitors.
Yeah,
so.
I tell people all the time, I am my own producer, host, and showrunner, and so I'm looking at things all the time while I'm talking and listening. But how, as the United States was laid out as a republic, granting you that the Constitution is a progressive document, are we better off under the current system of trying to get back to the ideology that was the groundwork for the Constitution, or do we scrap it all, and what does it look like?
Yeah, so we should scrap Enlightenment principles immediately.
Okay.
Because Enlightenment principles lead to egalitarianism. Egalitarianism leads to an endless need for equality where nothing needs to be equalized. This is the problem, is that once you give one
can you explain what you mean where we have this endless need for equality where nothing is ever equal?
Yeah, so if we have let's say homosexual marriage as an example of this, when homosexuals were able to become married and have the exact same rights, did they just suddenly stop bitching about not being equal in society? No. There's still a lot more work to do, guys. Well, yeah, we got past this milestone, but now we got to get to the next milestone, and then the next milestone, and then the next, and it's endless. And they admit that it's endless. They say that egalitarianism is essentially impossible, but they're going to endlessly move towards it anyhow. And we ought to be able to, at some point, get at least somewhat close, and then we'll have this societal utopia. It's all nonsense, because you can't take the hierarchical nature out of the system of human beings. Human beings
operate
100%. Literally upon basis of merit and skill and charisma and all. It's such a dynamic field for how people operate inside of society that egalitarianism on its face should seem stupid to the average interpreter. The second they even hear the word, well, I want society to be equal, they should be repulsed by it, because it makes no sense on its face. People are not equal. They're not equal in skill. They're not equal in merits or charisma or strength or height or anything. Right? Just being born ugly is a massive disadvantage.
I
Right?
agree.
Whereas being born
100%.
beautiful is a massive advantage. How do we make that equal? Do we chop up somebody's face to make them, and but this is where,
Well, then you're dealing with Harrison Bergeron.
yeah, well, this is now where society is heading, where, soon, due to these new systems that they're implementing, such as, I don't know if you saw the debate we had on the elixir of life,
I did not see that one.
CRISPR technology, but it won't be too long before progressives begin to say that people should not even be formed to be prettier or less pretty than another, or that the heights should remain equal so that there's no disadvantage within society. This is a never-ending gobstopper. Progressivism cannot stop, and you'll never achieve its goal because its goal is unachievable. So what should society look like? What ought it look like is a much more difficult question. It's hard to say, but there needs to be some type of merit to the hierarchical system that we find ourselves removed from, and that we desperately want to go back to. That's why populists like Trump get elected, because people are desperate to go back to some type of exchange between people that is based around their own innate hierarchical sensibilities.
Do you, in the perfect world, you either have really small hands or that's a big can of beer?
Yeah, it's a tall boy.
Is that still Miller?
Yeah.
Oh, geez. Folks, the TC does not endorse the drinking of macro brew. I live in a town with a microbrew, so I have to be careful. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, you drink smug beer? Do you drink smug beer?
I don't. I drink frou-frou water with bourbon in it.
Okay, gotcha.
Smug beer. That's true. It's what it is. It's smug beer.
It's smug beer.
It's smug beer. No, I actually live in the land of Busch Light. So
yeah, see, that's far less smug beer, right? If you're
there's nothing smug about Busch Light.
If your wife doesn't want to be seen next to your cart because it's filled with Pabst Blue Ribbon, you've made it into the BPF club, right? That's the way that works. So
yeah, right. When you look at the situation that we're in right now with the republic as it stands, and you're trying to address this from a having the best impact that you possibly can, how do you convince people that the Constitution was a failed document full of flaws, and how in the world do you change it?
Well, you can't, not like that. So the way that you're expressing it, how could I convince large swaths of the people that their entire worldview is flawed? It can't be done, at least not by me. Maybe somebody else who is far more charismatic and much wiser than me would be able to do such a thing. But even then, I doubt it. Change is incremental both ways. The progressives did not come to power to in the sense that they have infiltrated every institution that we have on planet Earth, at least major institutions and governmental institutions, it was not an overnight success. It was incremental over about 100-year span. It took a long time for them. And a lot of it was organically done. They had the groundwork already paved for them from these constitutional principles. So what I say is the same exact thing. It's going to be a lot of hard work that's cross-generational. This is not something that's going to be done, and the work's not going to be done within my lifetime, maybe not till my grandchildren's lifetime. It has to be incrementally done on our end as well. And it's going to take a long time. It's the people who shout and rage with their fist held and say, we're going to reform the entirety of society. Those people probably have it wrong. It's not going to happen. Cultural shifts and swings don't operate that way. It's incremental. Now, sometimes you can see an avalanche where a lot of change happens quickly.
Which is always dangerous, by the way.
It can be, and it can also be very good. It can be a renaissance or a rebellion. It can be all types of different things. You see these lands.
Hold on a second. Let's go back to that, though. Mm-hmm. You use the word renaissance.
Yes.
Are you using the word Renaissance in the same way that we recognize the Renaissance period?
No.
Okay, so because when you throw that out there, and you know this,
I'm just talking about massive reforms
okay,
outside of violence.
that's what I was asking, because we hear about the Renaissance today, and we have this idealistic mindset of what that is, what that looks like, what it means. But what would that Renaissance look like in relation to the Republic of the United States today?
Well, it would start as a cultural backlash, which we're already seeing, where younger generations, especially of men, begin to push back greatly against the system that is arrayed against them. It does everything that it can to destroy masculinity. It does everything that it can to destroy anything that makes a young man's life worth living, or an old man's life worth living. All of the things that make us happy. For instance, I have a story that I tell people. When I was in high school, it was not all that uncommon. And when I was in middle school, when I was around my friends, if we were having fun.
I'm going solo so people can focus on you and not look at my face.
Oh, sorry. When people were having fun, or we were at a party or something, one of your friends might lean over and slug you right across the face for no particularly good reason, other than the
You
fact
must have
that,
known my friends.
yeah, other than the fact that he thought it was funny. And you know what? The guy who got slugged often thought it was funny, right? These types of masculine displays have been beaten out of the public consciousness for some type of real good, feel good nonsense. And I don't even understand it. Most people don't understand it. So you'll start to see pushback and backlash, which you're seeing now. People moving backwards, looking to older generations for their wisdom and looking to their societies for guidance. What that starts with is cultural infiltration, where you begin to take back those institutions through infiltration and eventually domination. It basically, the pendulum swings back the other way, and it's an anti-progressive march to the home stretch rather than a progressive one, until eventually the Constitution itself is completely eroded to the point where it's meaningless, which is, we're almost there now, and then you can begin to implement better policies. That's how this probably ends up happening.
Which brings to mind, so I did I have a little series that I do called Drive Time Dialectics, and I did a commentary today from a constitutional originalist perspective about Donald Trump's comments, and everybody, of course, is taken up defending the Trumpster, saying that he wasn't calling for suspending the Constitution. What I'm hearing from you is that there might be a place for suspending the Constitution, or doing away with it, because it's an Enlightenment document. But are we at that place in our society right now where people are ready for a complete reconstruction?
Yes, the Constitution's been eroded to the point where it's meaningless anyway. You do not have First Amendment rights. You know that you don't have First Amendment rights. You have no Second Amendment rights, and you know that too. You know it. And when it comes,
and we don't really have Fourth Amendment.
Well, and you don't have Third Amendment either. The Third Amendment states that the state can't just come in and stake out your house. They can't just outside of wartime come in and take your home over. They can do that too. Every single amendment has been eroded to the point where they're rendered useless anyway. The document is only as good as the toilet paper roll now in which it's attached to. So what good does it do anyway? You do not have freedom of speech. You have freer speech in places that have speech laws in many cases. Same thing.
Give me an example.
Where there might be, for instance, speech laws against the crown. Let's say that you can't speak ill of the crown, but they definitely won't stop you from saying something like, I don't know, the N-word, or saying, the F slur, or things like this. They're not going to destroy your entire life over things like that. Now, I don't agree with saying that word. Even I don't appreciate it. Don't like it, but I don't really give a shit if somebody else says it. It's not like it's not the end of the world for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it doesn't weigh you down and ruin your day.
Yeah, I don't care. I don't
Right.
care. And they should be able to say that shit if they want to. And the same thing with saying the F slur, right? Who cares? Who cares? Like, this is what the Constitution is going to get bent over whether or not somebody got their fifis hurt because they got called the F slur, if it can be bent that badly by something so moderate, then what good is it?
Right. And I don't, how do I want to say this? I don't dispute the erosion of liberty in the United States Republic. You would go back further, I'm sure. I go back to Lincoln, who I think was the most tyrannical president we've ever had, ultimately.
Bloodthirsty monster.
Yeah, I like it's really so like when I talk about this, so I had a friend of mine, and I shared a little bit with you about my former life as a member of the law enforcement world, and told you briefly about that.
Yeah.
But I stood up for, during all of the COOF restrictions and all of the lockdowns and all that stuff and the business closures, I stood up for a woman and her family who live about an hour away from me, and called out the garbage that was happening. And she ended up she was imprisoned on misdemeanor charges for defying the governor's executive orders here in Minnesota. And I don't know which state you guys are in,
Michigan.
but Michigan. Oh, geez, you have it almost as bad as we do.
Yeah, we were literally under the boot heels
Of
an absolute tyrant named Gretchen Whitmer.
yeah.
And in a just society, such a
She would have
tyrant
been,
would have been brought to justice a long time ago.
and it
For
might
the
have
things
involved
that this
something with a
horrible
blade.
bitch did. She's a horrible bitch, and she
Yeah.
absolutely deserves to be tried for treason, in my estimation. But that's just me.
No, I think that Catherine Henry of Michigan would agree with you, if you know who she is. So,
Yeah.
So this friend of mine, Lisa Hansen, ended up being imprisoned for her defiance of the governor, and she ended up winning a small kind of a Pyrrhic victory here recently. And I had her and the attorney she ended up hiring to come on, and I brought up that Lincoln was a tyrant, and the attorney challenged me and said, but he saved the republic. And I'm paraphrasing.
Mm-hmm.
And his big concern was he didn't want to be identified as a racist, because I called that out and said that Lincoln was a tyrant. When you go back to Lincoln and you look at what he did, that was a complete, in my perspective, and I said this to someone today, that was a complete dissolution of the Constitution, period. We haven't lived under a constitutional republic since Lincoln. And I know
we didn't live in one almost the day that they had the whiskey tax.
I don't
know.
dispute. I don't dispute the Whiskey Rebellion argument at all. But there's this tangible place in history, because we've all been raised in this mindset that Lincoln was this grand hero, right? I mean, we've all been taught this. He was this grand hero that died a martyr's death because he did the right thing.
He also hunted vampires professionally, I'm told.
Oh, folks, when the conversation degenerates into pop culture.
Anyway, go ahead.
No, I appreciate it. I love it. When you look at that, we have been in trouble at the very least, since Lincoln. We have been in an incredible amount of trouble as a republic since then. Would you argue that the only way for us to, maybe you wouldn't argue that, is there any way to save the republic, or are we coming back down to a series of city-states, or city-states, really, individual nations within the framework of what once was the United States?
That won't come anytime soon. Patriotism still runs really strong inside of the United States, and it's cross-generational. There's still a lot of people's grandpappies left alive who fought against them Nazis. And there's a lot of people whose fathers were in Vietnam, and a lot of people whose fathers were in Desert Storm, and it's down the line. And that style of patriotism is not going to go away anytime soon. And that in and of itself has been something of a cultural glue, and it was for a long time, at least, inside of the United States. But as this progresses, eventually you may end up with some type of, amicable divorce. It's possible. I don't think that it's likely, though. I don't think that an amicable divorce will be where it goes. I think that you're heading for authoritarianism. I think that that's more the demand that people have. Generally speaking, when society begins to crumble and fall apart, they look more and more towards authoritarian figures to help save them from the plight that they're in. You have people now who are rising to power who really have no business rising to power because this is such a staunch need. Then people are demanding it across the board, left or right. Leftists have their own version of authoritarian communists who they want to push to the forefront. They love authoritarianism even more than the right in many instances. They're happy to enforce whatever their paradigms are. It's just that the right often is behind the curve because we don't feel like we should be enforcing our own paradigms. And I think that that's a huge mistake. And so you're going to end up with the society of those who choose to use the government to enforce their worldviews. And if we don't do that, they're going to.
I like what you're saying here, because this is an argument that I've been making for some time, is that the very thing that most conservatives push against is they're going to use this against us. And then they turn around and themselves will make the argument, we should do this. So you go back to a particular period in time recently within the last 2 years where there may have been some voting that took place and people were not real happy with the outcome of the vote. That's the most I'm going to say about it, because
that's all you need to say. Yeah, we're hip to it, man. We know what you're saying
because you are experienced at this podcasting thing. And a lot of the people that were supporting this individual who they were concerned was being ripped off immediately called for a suspension of everything and said we needed to invoke martial law. Do you believe that we have come that far now as a nation where both sides of the two political aisles, and let's just be honest, this uniparty has us in a lock right now, that they're really making the argument, both of them are making arguments for authoritarianism, and one side is okay with authoritarianism because it supports their views, and the other side is okay with authoritarianism because it supports their views. And then you've got people like you and I out here going, authoritarianism, the way you guys look at it, is bad for everyone. And when you have a Trump type person who comes out and makes a statement like he made here in the last few days, whether we understood it correctly or not, literally said that one interpretation is he's saying the Constitution's already been suspended, or the other interpretation, which is the way I see it, is that he's okay with suspending the Constitution if he can get back into office.
Good.
Elaborate, sir.
Well, so I can't get too detailed, obviously, and you understand why, but assuming in a hypothetical situation, somebody was playing by the rules of a contest and then won by the rules of the contest, and they refused to give him the prize, do the rules of the contest matter anymore? And if the answer is no, and you just go and you take your prize because you earned it, what's the problem with that exactly? There is no problem with that. It's already yours. You've already won it. It's already your thing. So if such a thing is necessary, then such a thing is necessary. And the thing is that what kind of banana fucking republic do you have, or I'm sorry, banana contest do you have where you can win and still not be given the prize, right? That's that people intuitively would find that such a thing to be abhorrent and say that system is so corrupted that the rules and the hierarchy that enforce them probably needs to be removed.
What would this nation look like if you were to be able to influence politicians, the people that are supposed to be servants of the public, servants of the citizens of the U.S., what would the republic look like in your eyes?
Well, I don't know. Explain what you mean by influence them. Like lobby them?
No, not lobby them, but if you were able to advise and counsel them, and they were going to take your counsel, who's going to listen to you and I, right?
Mhm.
We're just YouTube people. One of us has a really fast growing channel, and the other one is me. So,
So one guy that you could actually look at who does seem to understand the core principle behind this is one thing that you could push politicians towards that would be the most effective strategy for not just the right wing, but for the entire nation is an actual return to a value set that is Christian in standard. And there's Fuentes, for instance, has played on this in a very, very big way. And it's not a bad message because it is true. We lack moral foundation. And since there is no longer a moral foundation inside the nation, it's become a free for all for everybody.
are you
And that's the
referring to
problem.
NF?
I don't know.
You
Yeah.
said
Yes.
okay,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. So he is right about that. His methodology is insane. It's going to backfire and fuck us all over. But it doesn't matter. In the end, he is right about this thing, which is that without this core foundation of ethics and without some type of grounding principle, you don't have a nation anyway. You have a bunch of fucking plebs and strangers who have no shared identity whatsoever anymore, along with the massive threat that mass migration has been, where it's completely destroyed the entire demographic makeup of the United States over a 60-year span. There is no longer anything holding people together. So why would we expect that the Constitution would be held together? It's not going to be as we progress through this. So I would say that the only thing that's left to preserve anything would be some kind of cohesive glue that binds people together. And the only thing that's left is religion. There is nothing else. There's nothing else. But the key is, there really never has been anything else. You can't have a culture that's multi-religious. They can't agree on their value set. If you can't agree on a value set, then you can't have a nation. If you can't agree on a value set, you can't have anything. You can't even have a neighbor if you can't agree on the value set.
Yeah, and I can see that in boy, what obviously, as an Orthodox, you live next to people that aren't Orthodox and don't share your values.
They do share my values.
Okay, many of them share your values, but there are people in your neighborhood, your community, somewhere that do not share your values,
Mm-hmm.
and yet you live at peace with them.
No, we don't live at peace with them. If somebody lived in contrary to my values, they would be thieves. They would be liars. They would be scum. These would be people who inside of smaller rural communities are rigorously drummed out. And the way that they get drummed out is not through any violent means, nor should violent means ever be used. It's just by social ostracizing. That's it. There's a stigma that relates to these kinds of people where people refuse to associate with them, and so they leave. That's how that operates in real time. If you have a contrary value set to my own, meaning you're not a person who can be trusted to do business, you're not a person who can be trusted to have ethical foundations, you're a person who can't be trusted to tell the truth because you can't be trusted at all, et cetera, et cetera. These people are broadly ostracized by a community at large because they can't exist within it.
So, if I'm understanding you, these individuals, even though they may have a perspective about the source of your values being different, still live by your values.
Sure. Well, I'm talking about a set. The
Right.
philosophy within Orthodoxy, you could consider it to be called economia. But within you understand that you and I may take a subjective take on what constitutes theft, right? So you might say,
We'd probably agree, but anyway. Yeah.
maybe, right? But maybe not. Maybe we might have some minor disagreements about what constitutes it. So what? That's not a huge deal. Okay. These kind of minor deviations, that's not a huge problem within a value set. The problem in a value set comes when we have these huge schismatic value structures where you might come to me and say, that church that you go to every day, we demand that you allow homosexuals to be married in it. Now we have a problem in our value set. Now we're not even inside the same framework anymore. Or if you came to me and said, I don't know, any number of different examples. Say a person said theft was okay, or illicit business practices were okay, taking advantage of people were okay during emergency situations, things like this. These would all be outside of some type of value set. And so once you have that delineation, that's when we end up with these problems between people that become so schismatic that they're not reconcilable.
OG Snoop, he refers to you as BPF. I don't know. He says that's your internet name.
Yeah, that's correct.
I got a guy from Minnesota who knows more about your internet name than I do. I don't like.
Well, OG Snoop is a longtime listener to the Crucible and a longtime Discord member as well. And I always appreciate him here. Thank you, by the way, for supporting this gentleman's channel.
Thank you very much.
Who went out of his way to host me today. And it is hard for me to find time, but I always try to make time for anybody who wants me to come on. I don't care about the channel size or that's all nonsense to me. People with conversations like this need to be taking place everywhere. That's what the Crucible is about.
No, and that's why I wanted you on, honestly, is because I see that even in differences, you're able to, and you know this, you kind of make, I don't want to say light of it, but you make it very clear that you can have friendships with people and disagree with them and still tear them apart in a debate.
That's true.
It's,
and it's necessary. I mean, it's necessary.
Which is why I wanted to emphasize this isn't a debate. This is
of course not.
A conversation about your views, which
but
is what I do mostly.
But there is a worldview exchange, and you yourself, you have to reconcile this. You have to reconcile the fact that you understand there's something really bad in the water, right? It doesn't.
And it's not snake venom, ladies and gentlemen.
It doesn't taste good. It doesn't taste good anymore. And the reason that society is beginning to fail you isn't because you're failing. The reason society is beginning to fail you is because there's a schism between the core values that you find yourself uncompromising on, that you think society has moved past. And that's the problem. This is the fundamental issue. So if you have somebody who says something like Fuentes did when he said Christianity needs to be the push in the nation, he's right. Because without that value set, there is no value set. There is nothing. There is no way for us to reconcile a culture without a value set. It just can't be done,
I don't know who Wicked Wally is, but he says you appreciate dad jokes.
Yeah. Well, I'm a dad, so kind of have to.
Which is really bad because I hate dad jokes.
Oh, well, I thought so. I mean, it's like an ongoing theme. He makes them so terrible that you can't help but laugh at them, right?
That's Wicked Wally's forte?
Yeah, it's an ongoing theme. When I have major debate personalities come in and I read off a Wicked Wally dad joke just to make them suffer through it, it's an ongoing theme of the Crucible. He's become a fixture. So,
it's you were talking about addressing the reality that things are where they are.
Yeah.
And that, well, and I'm a presuppositionalist in my apologetic. I don't want to say it's a new view for me. I've been at it for a while. I reject evidentialism. I hate evidentialism. If you use evidence to argue somebody into Christianity, then somebody can come along with evidence and argue them uh, out of it as well. If that's how it works. So I don't really cling to evidentialism, but presuppositionalism for me is everybody presupposes what we've been saying, which is everybody has a moral standard. Everybody has a moral standard.
Yeah, there has to be
Yeah.
a set.
Yeah. Which is precisely why I get really pissed off at the people who go, atheists are all immoral. And I'm like, well, that's patently untrue. They're not. They're not immoral.
Well,
They
think
don't have
of it-
any. They may not recognize the source of their morality.
Well, yeah, it's us. They piggyback off of us. But the thing is that think of it. You're right. You're absolutely right. But think of it like a prison. A prison has a moral set. You take all the world's scumbags and converge them: liars, rapists, murderers, adulterers, all the most horrific scum that you can think of, and you put them together in a place like Australia, let's say. They might form their own country, right? I'm kidding. But I'm saying, if you put them
I do have Australian viewers.
I'm joking.
Knock
I'm
it
joking.
off now.
If you put them all together in a prison, they still come up with a value set. The value set might be simple. It might be a
hierarchy.
simple code like no snitching, no this, don't work with the guards don't work with the inmates. Whatever it is, it's going to come up with a structured value set. And if you step outside of the value set, there's going to be consequences that are significant. And the problem with the free-for-all of the American population is that there are no significant consequences for stepping outside the value set. Ever. If you have enough money, you can step outside the value set. If you have enough influence, you can step outside the value set. It's ongoing. The exceptions are everywhere. So we don't play by the same rules. Nothing's fair across the board. Nothing works together correctly because of this. And you can't get back to a point of that because we don't share the same values. So if we don't share the same values, we can't have a nation. We can't have a culture. We can't have sophistication. We can't have actual real progress. We just are going to continue to regress and call it progress.
Which is precisely the argument I make with a lot of people when they say, well, I don't have your values. And I'm like, well, do you lock your doors at night? Sure, I do. Okay, why? Well, because I don't want people to steal from me. So stealing is wrong? Well, of course stealing is wrong. Well, why is stealing wrong? Well, because it's my property and I work for it. Sure, but why is that wrong? And, we could go into the
yeah,
the
you're
rabbit-
backing it up
yeah.
into trying to
Yeah.
find a foundational point
Right.
from which you can say, the reason you think that this is wrong is because you adhere to actually my value.
You've had to borrow from my worldview.
Yeah, the only reason that they reject your worldview and my worldview is not because we're incorrect,
There's something
but
personal
because they
involved.
want to have gay sex.
Or anything. What they
That's the main one. It's just that they'll listen. I'm going to be totally honest with you.
I would expect nothing less after watching so many of your.
These people will move heaven and earth in order to have gay sex. I don't know why. I don't know why the focus has to be 100% on we will do anything under the sun, undermine all cultural value structures, destroy everything in order to have gay sex, but they will do that. I don't know why that is. I have no clue. But it is true. And every single time I see a person push back against the value structure, it's for some form of degeneracy every single time.
Do you think that in the U.S., the argument could be made that it's the devaluation of a central family structure?
I'm sorry, restate that?
Do you think that it could be the argument ultimately is a devaluation of the central family structure?
I think that that's a symptom, but I don't think that that's.
But don't you think that's a goal?
I don't think that that's the overarching goal. The goal is worse. It's far worse. The destabilization. Okay. So a stable family actually creates a stable tax base from which elitist scumbags can continuously take your wealth. and you're going
Right,
to
but they
earn
don't
more.
want they don't want a stable tax base. They want a dependent tax. They want
Yeah,
a
but
dependent populace.
well, but how do they? You can't depend on a nation that's broke. They have to be collecting the revenue somewhere in order to pay out these massive entitlements. The more stable a family unit is, the more likely it is that you're going to make a lot of money, and that they're going to be able to collect more in taxes. It also is very helpful to keep the crime rate down. I think that this is actually a far more simplistic answer than trying to destabilize the family unit. I literally think that they will destroy all institutions and everything on planet Earth in order to have gay sex. I'm not lying to you. I'm not kidding. I think
No,
that the
I
ultimate
believe you.
goal, I think that that's the
I
ultimate
believe
goal.
you.
And if the
That's not
symptom of that is we have to destroy the family because a family unit's in our way, we'll do that. If we have to destroy this institution, institute communism, we'll do that. Whatever we have to do in order to do this act, we will do. This is every single time I bring this back to the moral foundations of why it is that you piggyback off of my morals, but reject these things. What do they reject? I don't want to have, sex out of marriage. I want to have promiscuity and lots of sex partners. So I reject your worldview. I want to have gay sex. I reject your worldview. I want to do this bad, horrible sexual thing. So I reject your value set. It's always degeneracy every single time. They never make coherent arguments about anything besides that.
the reason I asked about the devaluation of the family is because when you look at what Gramsci said, when you look at what his disciples said, and even his predecessors, when you look at Dewey, who is considered the father of modern government education,
Mm-hmm.
Dewey stated, and he was there again. He predates Gramsci, and I think Gramsci is a dangerous individual. Don't get me wrong, but Dewey stated that the goal of modern American education, and because that's the framework he was working in, was to devalue and destroy the centralized family, which because he wanted the influence of the church and the family out of the lives of children. And we could argue, okay, well, maybe he had a perspective that said homosexuality is the end goal here and we're trying to defend that. But what Dewey was doing was a deconstructing the family and turning it into community. And I don't have a problem with the word community. We all live in communities,
Sure, it's a
one way or
collection
another.
of families.
Right. No, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
But he was looking at a deconstruction of the family unit because he knew that when you isolated people and you were able to take them away from the influence of the church, take them away from the influence of their family, they were going to be easier to manipulate. And I'm wondering when I think about this as you're saying it, is that agenda, the decentralization of the family, does that lead to what you're talking about, or is that the end goal of what you're talking about?
It's a symptom. It's only
okay.
a symptom. If they could have fully intact units, family units that were perfectly in line with LGBTQ and homosexual propaganda so that they could have an even stronger, more fortified tax base, they would do it. There is something that's ritualistic about this. Understand that public school systems have become centralized grooming centers in which indoctrination towards LGBTQ has become a centralized theme. It is thematic throughout public institutions now, especially public schools, where questioning your sexuality is not just a thing that some people do, but a requirement for you to get through the curriculum. Is that going to create unstable families as a consequence? Yes. Do they care? No, they don't care.
I think they do. I think they want a destabilized family because a destabilized family is not able to combat this.
Well, that's because you think in your worldview that the destabilization of the family unit and destabilization of population means that elites have more control, but the opposite is true. Stability creates the most amount of maximum control for elites. They don't want to see family units unstable necessarily, but they'll do anything in their power in order to push degenerate activities as part of some type of
so they'll
bizarre
push it.
ritualistic sacrament.
So they'll push redefining the family, such as it takes a village.
Sure. Or a throuple, or a, you know what I mean? Homosexuals can now, just whatever is necessary to push the degeneracy, they'll do as a consequence. If they could have stable family units that made lots of money that they could tax on top of that, I'm sure that they would absolutely adore that. Unfortunately, that's just not the way that society works. I think that the destabilization as a consequence was not necessarily the goal. The goal always seems to be the march towards do as thou wilt. If you can have stabilized families within the framework of do as thou wilt, they don't care. But if you can't, they don't care about that either. They just don't seem to care as long as we can get to whatever this ultimate form of humanity with no restrictions on sexuality or morality. That seems to be the ultimate goal. And progressives themselves seemingly admit this almost on the spot when questioned.
Does an ideal nation, because you referenced NF Fuentes, does an ideal nation for you look like pockets of individuals who are in agreement on worldview, being able to align themselves with one another so that they have their own community, family units, living in tandem? Or would you consider it to be more of a theocratic oligarchy?
Well, I think I understand what you're asking. I think both are oversimplifications, but let me
I'm
address.
notorious for that. So,
Well, I mean, that's how you have to ask questions sometimes, right? You can't ask 3-paragraph long questions. That wouldn't be prudent. So let me try to address one at a time. Is the ultimate goal theocracy? It doesn't need to be theocratic in nature. It's not necessary. The value set, though, generally seems to come from some type of mixture of a concentration of cooperation between the church and the state. But this generally requires some type of state religion, or at least some type of religion that most people within the state adhere to, so that you can have that kind of cooperation for the value set. Is that theocratic in nature? It's not. It doesn't need to be theocratic at all. Does that mean that they're separate? They can be, but they still have to work in unison. And right now they do. A politician, if they are ruling, has to rule through their faith. Where else do they get their value set from to know what's right or wrong? So you're not ever going to really dismantle.
It's impossible for a person to remove their faith values from their.
Then you haven't really separated church and state anyway.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that there needs to be some type of synergistic relationship between the value structure of Christianity and the nation in which the Christians live.
Ultimately, the only people that are being told that they have to remove their value structure from their politics are conservative Christians.
Well, why though? Their value set
because it's the basis. Because it's the basis for all values.
Yeah, because they're the Christians. They have the value set. So anything to devalue that value set, that will be done. Do as thou wilt. That is the mantra. It's a never-ending mantra. They really that's the ultimate goal for these people, is to have a non-restrained, post modern, and also when you talk about almost post-human, because I mean what these people really want to do is they're moving scientifically as much as possible towards CRISPR technology. I don't think CRISPR technology will ever become a reality, don't get me wrong, but recognize that within the confines of this technology, what they're talking about doing is making essentially mail order babies.
You're talking about are you talking about transhumanism or?
Well, this is transhumanism times 3,000, right? That's what CRISPR is. It's a way to edit genetic DNA
For
structures. So
for morons like me, what is CRISPR technology?
CRISPR tech, well, that's what I was just saying. It's a form of technology that is designed to actually go in and genetically do editing to human beings. This is something that's being talked about widespread now. It's CRISPR. And I know atheist neuroscientists who are adamantly against this because they believe that it's against the natural evolutionary state of humanity and that we're playing God, and we're going to see ramifications from that as well.
Humans are playing God?
Yeah.
The hell you say?
Yeah. I mean, they are. So this is what I'm saying is that ultimately, is transhumanism on the table? Well, not only is it on the table, but it's the logical end of progressive ideology anyway, is to have some type of post-human humanity. This is ultimately a non-restrained, can do whatever they want population. So I think that whatever the consequence of that is what they don't care about. Is people often will ask, for instance, on the left, they make valid points. Why would the government want to destabilize the best tax base that they have, knowing that they would then have to use critical funding to support them? Well, they wouldn't. It's not a logical structure, though. This is a transcendent order which is trying to push us more and more towards this type of post-human world.
Well, I think they're pushing us towards modern feudalism myself.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe. I
see they really do. I mean, with statements out there like you will own nothing and you'll be happy and you'll eat bugs while you're doing it, they really do want us into some form of modern feudalism.
The thing is that most of what I see that as is some type of uplift to try to say, look, we know that there's going to be massive dependency upon the state, so we're going to have to take drastic measures so that our population doesn't starve to death and things like this. That's what I think that the pushback is. Again, I think that the destabilization as a consequence is not necessarily the goal. It's just a consequence of what the goal is. That's all I'm saying. So I don't think there's a bunch of people in an office somewhere who work for the government who are going, how do we destabilize the family unit? I think instead they say, well, we're looking for a very progressive ideology that moves us towards the most egalitarian and independent forms of freedom. And the way that we do that is by making sure that we have unification amongst the population with these egalitarian thematics. And these themes are going to include things like LGBTQ communities getting together and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever the destabilization is, they just don't care.
Let me ask it from this perspective. One of the biggest pushes that we see in our society right now is a differentiation between the ethnicities. I hate the term race.
Mm-hmm.
I know some people get bent out of shape with me for that, but I hate the term race. When you look at it from a historical perspective, ethnos, the Greek word ethnos, the nations, is a more apt description. And we have people talking right now that there's never been a time in history, especially in the United States, where ethnic division has been worse than it is now. I look around and I go, I'm not experiencing that. What I'm experiencing is this push by the media, push by the state at all of her levels, the municipal state, the federal state, the state, whatever, to cause these divisions. Do you think that that's part and parcel of degeneracy because they need us at each other's throats to work the other part of their agenda in? Or do you think it's a happy coincidence for them?
I think that has a lot more nuance and complexity to it than people think until they really dive in.
That's another one of those 3-paragraph questions.
Yeah, well, it really is. The thing is that you are correct. I myself am not a racialist, but I do rely heavily on ethnicity. I'm not an ethno-nationalist, but most certainly a cultural nationalist. I understand there has to be some type of glue that ties a culture together. Race itself is not just socially constructed. There has to be some type of grounding from which people have derived.
There are definite ethnic origins for cultural
Yeah.
differences.
Yeah. So if that's the grounding, and they're saying these two races don't get on, there's nothing really wrong with saying that. It's not necessarily a horrific or objectively wrong thing to say. What I think, though, is that if you have no cultural cohesion, no cohesive glue, that the entire point becomes moot anyway. For instance, if you had a black population that acted within the same value set the white population acted within, nobody would give a shit. They wouldn't consider these things to be problematic. The thing is that peoples generally who look similar to each other within demographic areas share the same value set. And if you mix them together and they don't share the same value set, we end up with all types of cultural issues. And that's what we're seeing now with mass migration and things like this. If the value set was the same, I don't think we would have a care in the world. But people can easily point to the fact that people who look this way have a different value set. And so you almost can't blame them for being racist, right? You almost can't. You're almost like, oh, well, I kind of understand why you think the way that you do. It's more complex than that. But from the layman's term, why wouldn't they be racist? Like, why wouldn't they? If they see that everybody who is detrimental to my value set looks this way, why wouldn't they take
do you
a
think that's
categorization?
do you think that might be more or more beneficially described as culturist? Because I think you look at certain segments of society today, and some of the most pro-American people are people who are white and have come from predominantly white cultures in Europe and have said, I've come from a place where X, Y, and Z happen, and I don't ever want to see that happen here. And so they come over and they adapt, but there are people from those same areas, regions, who bring a culture with them, and they don't want to change. They don't want to adapt to the culture around them. And the pushback then at that point becomes, your culture is completely foreign to, I mean, literally, that's why we call them foreigners, right? Your cultural views are completely foreign to me, and I don't want your cultural views in here dictating what my views should be in my nation of origin.
So it's a value set issue.
Right.
So since it's a value set issue, though, if the demographic from which this culture comes from looks a certain way, that would be called racist. And this is the whole problem for that's why this issue is far more complex than just things like IQ and this and that. That's all noise in comparison to the value set. When a person says, like, look, in Europe right now, in England, Islamic value sets are not welcome inside of our Anglican value set. They have an Anglican church, right? And they're not welcome within that value set. They don't value the same things. So since they don't value the same things, of course, this one culture is going to reject the other, but they're called racist for doing so. And that's bullshit. It's not a race issue. I agree with you. It is a cultural issue. But it's really easy to understand why it becomes a race issue.
Well, don't you think it's foisted on us? That if you disagree with this person, that if you disagree with this person, then you're a racist. But a person who might share the same ethnic background as the person that you disagree with, but shares your views, you embrace them.
That's why limited immigration was never problematic. It's mass migration that becomes problematic. When you massively import a different value set, it leaves no time for integration. Since there's no time for integration, you end up having two competing cultural ideologies clashing, and it becomes an absolutely dystopian nightmare. Christians and Islamicists are not going to get along and sing kumbaya because of the laws of the state. Religion transcends the laws of the state.
Which is exactly what I was pushing at, because there are Islamists who are European in their descent.
Yes, this is correct. There are.
Right. And there are Islamists who are American in their descent, which of course is predominantly a European. The great theologian Francis Schaeffer said that America, Australia, and New Zealand are all North European countries. And then you tell that to people, and they're like, "It's not Europe. What are you talking about?"
Right. But
It's the value
it's
set.
the
It's the
domination of
culture.
the right.
Yeah,
It's the
it's the
value
culture.
set again.
And
But
so,
all of this really, I think, in my estimation, it really just boils down to a value set. Now, there's some people who will say the value set comes from the internal demographics of the race. It's not true.
thank you, because
It's not true.
predominantly, and we saw this in the erosion of the family unit in the United States, in the Republic of the United States, even prior to all of the civil rights activism and everything. The strongest family units were African in the United States.
In some points in history, that's true.
Yeah.
So this is the thing. This is what I mean, is that the core of this is, what's the value set of the demographic? Can this other demographic be incorporated in who has the same value set? Multiculturalism actually pushes back against that and says, no, you don't need to share the same values in order to live together. And that's
impossible.
Absurd. It's
impossible.
Absurd.
Right.
Which is why multiculturalism in and of itself is a massive failure, and basically always will be, especially if it's mass migration. If you could throttle to a trickle the amount of immigrants that came into the United States from 1 million a year and throttle it down to something, let's say like 15,000, the integration of these families would be so minimalistic on the American public that you would see racism, or what the left would consider to be racism, essentially erode overnight.
Oh, it would go extinct.
Yes, because the value set would be able to be incorporated. It's
they would move into a neighborhood, and they would adapt the culture of the neighborhood.
Well, what choice do they have? They can't make a Chinatown. There's not enough Chinese people to do it, right? You have to integrate. You cannot segregate yourself from a population.
Which is why people like Monica Perez have argued that targeted immigration has been done to erode the family unit, to erode our values, because they, like, explain to your average American why a state like Minnesota would be targeted for a massive amount of Somali immigration.
Well, that's due probably mostly for gerrymandering purposes, in order to bring in future Democrat voters into a place that likely was a strong Republican stronghold, would be my guess.
Yeah, I wish I could say that about Minnesota in my lifetime, but yeah, no, I get your point. But that's what all this massive.
Even the potentiality for there being a stronghold in the future, that's what demographic shifts from a politician standpoint are about. Right. They're looking towards, how does the Democrat Party stay in power for the next 40 years? Yeah. It's by shifting the demographic to people who are more dependent upon the system. Kind of to your point, within the United States, that is a problem with mass migration, is the dependency on the system does breed Democrat voters. And it also breeds this huge gap between peoples who don't have the same value set, so they can't actually integrate with each other. They have huge social problems with each other.
Absolutely true. Yeah, and it's a forced conflict is what it is. It's just really
mass migration needs to be stopped immediately.
It's forced conflict. I don't care where you're from. I don't care.
Well, it's abhorrent and immoral, because you're expressing that regardless of what your own personal values are, you have to set those aside in order to embrace other people's. That's an immoral.
Or you're a horrible, rotten person.
Well, I mean, it's immoral from its foundation. The whole fruit is rotten from its foundation. So, mass migration needs to end now, not in weeks, not in months. Like, as we speak. If somebody could clamp that shut, I would be very happy about that.
It's almost like there's a place somewhere, I might have read something that said, "Woe to you who call evil good and good evil." I don't know. That might be something somewhere that I read. So I want to kind of transition towards, you being able to go and hang out with your family for the last hour of the night. You're east? You're on the east. You're on the eastern side of the timeline, aren't you?
Yeah.
Well,
but I've had to flip my sleeping schedule recently, so this is like 2 o'clock in the afternoon for me at the moment.
Are you doing overnights?
Not going to get into it, but
This-
I mean,
I know that.
I literally can't. I have enemies that try to
No.
politically assassinate me.
Yeah, I've heard that you've been
So
doxxed or swatted.
yeah, they well, there's political assassination. So
Yeah.
I'm not keen on like giving my schedule out. But right now
No,
I'm fine. Just so you know.
no, I totally understand that. Trust me. And everybody's, where are you working? I'm like, I'm not telling you. um, not your business. I'm love you to death. Not telling you where I work. Um, as you look at the Crucible and you look at your journey in Orthodoxy and whatnot, where are you headed with this? What's your goal
Yeah.
going
So
forward?
the Crucible is not, though I am Orthodox, an Orthodox channel. My former partner Pedro, he was a Calvinist.
Is
He
Pedro gone?
he is
I didn't realize that.
he had some issues that he wanted to get dealt with, and he felt like he could not just do what his job was on the Crucible and take care of those issues. And we fully support him. Love the guy very much. Very amicable departing. Very happy with him. Love him much. But I needed the help because it's the channel growth has been nutso. So Zen Shapiro, who was our in-house right-wing debater, was essentially given a promotion. He now co-hosts the Crucible with me. He's also Orthodox. However, this is not ever going to be an Orthodox channel, and nor do we want it to be. The point of it is to have these kinds of rigorous debates where we can actually get at these issues both politically and religiously. And it's what makes the Crucible so unique is that we do both styles of debate, and we do it uniquely in a way because we understand those issues. So we make the best pairings. We basically put on some of the best debate content I think you find online anywhere. I don't think many people even come close to us, and that probably is why we spread our growth. But on the other hand, we don't actually have to engage in other people's orbits. A lot of people have to attach themselves to large named creators in order to make their channels grow or things like that. We don't have that problem. We don't have to attach to an orbit or sell ourselves out or sell our values out. The Crucible will remain. All we'll do is continue to improve, but for the coming years, it will remain a top tier debate channel that just gets better and better at its craft. And all people from all walks of life are welcome to come in and debate these various issues because we need it now more desperately probably than ever before.
100% agree. And ladies and gentlemen, he is not afraid to platform. And I've said this before, not afraid to platform people who don't agree with him and treat him, firmly, but with respect and dignity, which is, missing, and also it's not your idea of a debate, like a formal debate in the sense of standing on a stage with a moderator and in a suit and a tie. It's actual head-on, tete-a-tete debate, and it's phenomenal and it's enjoyable, which is what's missing from most debates. Unless you're watching Scott Horton take on Bill Kristol, and at that point, that is hilarious and fun.
Yeah, there is a mixture across the board between what would be maybe classed as blood sport debates and also more academic style debates, which can become very blood sporty depending on what's going on. It depends on the topic, and it depends on the people, and it depends on what we're doing. But it's not formal debate. We focus on informal debate because that's when the most amount of truth I think surfaces. That's just me.
No, I agree. I think people have this idea that debate has to be this very formal. You have to have a moderator and a certain set of rules about what you can and cannot talk about and touch on, and that's what I've loved so far about the Crucible is that it's not set up that way. Going forward, are you looking to bring in a certain segment of society to debate, or are you just open to whoever might come along and wants to talk about their issues?
Well, the Crucible is also unique in the fact that we break into a lot of different communities that you wouldn't expect, Christians to break into. For instance, many of what I would consider my friendly degens on YouTube over, pickup artists, people like this. those people are also willing to engage. Many people are willing to engage on their ideology, and oftentimes because they want to know if it's wrong. That's the big thing that people forget, is it's not just a domination contest of me trying to prove you wrong, but oftentimes people come in very good faith wanting to be proved wrong. And I think that that's completely fair across the board. Everything from veganism to debates on LGBTQ issues and everything else in between. And we have completely.
I would not entertain a vegan on my channel. I just want everybody to know that.
Yeah. Well, we have neutral moderation. There's people who, I mean, I've gotten DMs mid-debate saying, you have got to have this transgender person cover up. And I'm like, nope, I'm sorry. This is society, and you need to deal with this. And if you can't deal with this, then you need to go away from the Crucible, because
you might actually be part of the problem if you can't deal with these differences.
Yeah, it's a brutal place, and there's almost no mercy here when it comes to these debates. And I don't save anybody, even if they're on my own team. I don't save them either, and I'll call them out and tell them, you got your ass kicked, and that's exactly what you deserve for not prepping right, or not articulating this right, and that's what you get. The left fields some phenomenal debaters, and the right has not, because they haven't had a great place where they can have, especially these theological debates. And we need to get back to this. We need to remember that we're just as skilled in the craft of debate. We're just as skilled at constructing logical arguments, and we have a better cultural remedy anyhow. So I think that the Crucible is necessary. And it is true that I myself personally am very biased, but I can give one hell of a neutral debate.
Well, I personally think that one of the reasons why debate from the right has fallen on its face is because that many of the people on the right, normie-cons, like I said earlier, kind of coined that phrase, have bought into the lie that they have to be anti-intellectual, anti-logic, and anti-reasoning. They just have to be, I'm a conservative, and no thought. And when you look at conservatism at its roots, it is the most intellectual and logical of positions.
Well, I'll tell you kind of like my experience is that what's ended up happening is conservatives often get gaslit off the internet, literally. They'll attach themselves to different leftist, kind of like smaller debate channels or things like this.
Yep.
And when they do that, they're always outnumbered 6-1. And the audience jeers at them, and the leftists beat them up one side and down the other as they try to stick with their arguments, and they try to stick with the things that they believe. And there's only so much of that pushback before a person breaks. And I see this along the Twitchosphere often, where a conservative will come in and he might even hand them their ass, but everybody will go to his comments and DM him and say, lost horribly, you're an idiot, you're a dumb fuck, this and they can't move through it. You know what I mean? They get gaslit right out of the arena, and that's by design, by the way.
Oh yeah.
So what I always say is, like, ignore all of that shit. If this is your value set, what else is worth fighting for? There's nothing else on planet Earth that's more important for you to be talking about, for you to be, hitting home with than this. And even if these people fight you tooth and nail, what did you think was going to happen? They're in charge. You're attacking the status quo. Yep. You're going to be laughed at and scoffed at and ridiculed, and all the things that I myself went through when I was debating. You know what I mean? But at least now I can offer a platform where it's neutral in the moderation, and commenters can come in, and it's not so brutal on the poor right winger who gets pulled in. You know what I mean?
Tatiana said, I said to my husband that, and she didn't even super chat. She's still getting this up here. I said to my husband that the reason society hasn't fallen into chaos is likely because of Crucible and channels like it. So, we have to get back to a place where we are able to engage in debate and do so in a way where we can still show respect and dignity to the person that you're debating, with the hopes that the conversation you're having with them in that debate is geared towards starting the ball rolling for them changing their worldview. And I think the biggest mistake that most of us make is that in that initial conversation we have with someone, we present all of this logic, all of this reasoning, all these facts that are tangible. They're based on abstracts that are outside of the subjective reality of the subjective position of the world. And we present all of these things to them, and we just expect them to make this change immediately because we've outwitted them in the debate. And when they don't change immediately, we abandon them. We won't talk with them anymore. We won't reason with them. We won't engage with logic and intellect with them anymore. We just dismiss them and we walk away.
Well, I think that's a great point. There's a gentleman who debates on my channel often named P.F. Young, very good man, and I can tell he's a good man. And I talk with him both on and off the Crucible. And he's somebody who's clearly looking. He's looking really hard, and he's defending values that he himself is struggling to even defend at this point, right? But it's like, we're not going to just give up the first time. We're going to keep going, right? We're going to keep on pummeling your worldview and beating it down until you get it, whether you like it or not, right? We're here. We're going to keep on doing this, and you're going to have to keep engaging. And if every argument finally fails and every moral system that you can think of finally is gone, what are you left with? You know, pride can only take you so far before finally a person can be like, you know, maybe you're right. You know what I mean? Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time for me. And if all that ever happened off of the entirety of the Crucibles, P.F. Young walked away and said, you know, my worldview has changed, then we did something great.
I was about to sneeze and now it's gone. So watch, while I'm talking, it's going to start up again. It's not about. It's really ultimately not about the number of people you reach. It's about the number of people that are ultimately changed. And
well, that takes reach, though.
No, don't dispute that at all. It goes back to our pre-show or pre-stream conversation, which is, you know, people getting mad at me because I still put things on YouTube. I'm like, are you crazy? It's the largest platform there is. Like, even if a quarter of the people who are subscribed to my channel watch, there's still impact. But there's also the depth of impact, which, you know, poor OG Snoop keeps coming back. You know, he's local to me. My understanding, he's local to me. But we keep coming back and we keep having these conversations over and over and over. And sooner or later, you're going to have an impact on these individuals who are listening. And that's why I appreciate people who come on and detract, you know, are dissenters from my view, because you have to have that.
Yeah.
If you're only living in this echo chamber where everybody's agreeing with you all the time, then you're not being challenged. You're not growing. And you and I talked about this briefly last night as we were, you know, that last leg of preparing for having you on. You and I have had major worldview shifts in our perspective over the last few years. And mine, you know, comes from, I was never a statist, so to speak, but there were certainly statist type positions that I held that had to be
back to that. We need to get you back to that, man.
Well, that's a different conversation maybe for another time, you know,
anyway, go ahead.
Which would be another 2 hours. But when you aren't able to have your worldview challenged and not be angry or offended at being challenged, you're actually the weak person. It's the person that's challenging you in those moments that's actually your best friend. In those moments, what would you, in closing, for you as you promote the Crucible and whatnot, where would you send people? What would you have them read, listen to, watch? Besides the Crucible, I mean, I know you want, and I want people to go to the Crucible. Don't get me wrong, because, you know, even if you disagree with them, you're going to learn a lot.
I think that you should buy Cult Feminism by my wife Rachel Wilson, which is a phenomenal book.
Because he wants to keep buying.
But some of the best places where you can look at agenda based problems that are going on and put them through a spiritual lens, so that you understand in context what it is that we're really fighting over. I would recommend that you go to channels like David Patrick Harry, and you'll find him at the Church of Eternal Logos. Very, very brilliant young man. Or David Urhan, very brilliant young man. Not just Christian apologetics, but people who understand that there's a political climate in which Christianity and modern Christianity must now find itself in, and it must now compete within this space.
Yep.
These people have thought about this over and over and over. Jay Dyer is another great example. I would highly recommend, not just as far as reading materials, the various books that they would produce on their site for you to get. And they make recommendations outside of their own stuff. Don't get me wrong. In fact, most of the things that they recommend were not written by them. But they take the time to contextualize these things so that you understand the greater societal impacts that happen, especially David Patrick Harry. I can't recommend his channel enough. This is a person who has spent a long period of time trying to understand a transhuman agenda moving forward in the spiritual aims inside of politics. This is very important because at the end of the day, politics is a spiritual battle. It's a core ethical fight. And spiritualism and your soul faith is where your ethics are always going to drive anyway, or what people will steal from you. So understanding that having somebody who can contextualize these things and put them into the ethos so that you understand the paradigm between the political situation that's going on and your own spiritual journey is extremely important. Tristan Haggard is another one. And he used to have a channel called Primal Health. My understanding is that now it's just called Tristan Haggard. Another great person who will run it through the filter. But I'll tell you right now that the best of them for understanding the political agenda moving in with the spiritual is David Patrick Harry. So I can't recommend that enough. That's where I would say, if you were going to try to draw modern resources to go off of their book selection, and also to take the time to watch some of these podcasts because they're phenomenal and highly informative.
Man, ladies and gentlemen, you didn't even pitch the Crucible that much in there. That's just amazing.
Let me do that then. And also make sure you come to the Crucible if you want to see a broad collection of ideologies come together to duke it out on the stage, mostly focusing on 1 versus 1, though we do have 2v2 debates, and we do sometimes do panels called the Inquisition. You'll see a lot of great debates coming up throughout the month of December. We always put on a great spread. And also, of course, tune in tomorrow night for the massive and this time epic Trash Talk extravaganza, which if you
this time it's epic. The other times it hasn't been epic.
It hasn't been. This one I think
this
is
epic, though.
Epic because of all the shit that's been going on. I haven't been able to get to it. So
this is going to be just epic. This is the epitome. And Tatiana wants to remind you not to forget Jay Dyer.
I didn't forget him.
There's your answer, Tatiana.
Did not forget him.
Did not forget at all. So what time tomorrow for the epic
Trash Talk extravaganza? You'll find it probably around 9 p.m. Eastern.
9 p.m. So for those of you that are live in the real world at 8 p.m. So I tell everybody it's a real world here because I grew up on Central Time. So the rest of you all live in a foreign world to me. So, well, Andrew, I appreciate your time and I appreciate you sharing your
One more thing.
Yeah, no.
To my audience, go over. This has been a very good host.
Thanks.
Go over, make sure that you subscribe to this channel and show him a little bit of love. You'll find him Minnesota Black Robe. Why don't you in the private chat real quick send me the link to the channel?
The link to the ask me that, would you? Yeah, I can do that. And folks, if you're not subscribed to the Crucible, I, it's the link is on. I think you sent me some sort of version of link of a link tree.
Yeah.
Um, well, why isn't it showing? That's real. Oh, there we go. There we go. Private chat, ladies and gentlemen. This is why we do everything. I am a professional. I run my own show, folks. There we go. I send it to you in private chat. Um, I was gonna tell you thanks. I started the day off. Um, did my little rant about Trump this morning, and I lost 4 or 5 subscribers. And you and having you on is pushed me well beyond what I lost. So
Make sure you
I
guys click that link, go over there, subscribe.
I appreciate it.
We always need more allies. Hopefully, maybe we can get Black Robe to come in for a debate sometime.
Oh, geez, dude, I am not equipped for that.
We're going to have to equip you. We need you. We need all of you to come into the Crucible and throw your hat in the arena. We need
There,
it
that
this way.
that I would I would love to see my subscriber base go over and check out the Crucible, even if it's just if you're the kind of person who drives by car accidents and is fascinated by them. If for no other reason, watch the Crucible because you will see somebody get wrecked in the Crucible. I'm telling you, it happens. It's. I loved your debate with Naomi.
Yeah, that was a wrecking, a tall
Yeah, it
order
was
wrecking.
definitely a wrecking.
But
So that's
I don't get as much opportunity anymore to get in the arena as I used to. So when I do, I really enjoy it. And but other than that, hosting the channel, it's a lot of work. I appreciate all the support from everybody, and I appreciate you having me on your show this fine evening. Thanks for
I appreciate you taking the time. I'll give you an example of what you talk about with people as you're saying goodbye. I was with the 82nd Airborne Division. I was stationed at Fort Bragg, and people
That's a
down there.
shitty duty station, by the way.
I miss it.
You miss Fort Bragg?
I no I
How many
I
jumps did you do?
I lost count.
Did you lose 2 inches?
Oh, dude, I have no knees left.
You
No
lost 2
knees.
inches?
Yeah, easily. I have no knees.
They give
I
you
w-
100% disability like they do the rest of the fucking airborne?
No, sir. I got out before they did that kind of stuff, and I got
Oh.
my co-host on Veteran Nation. I co-host another show on Right America Media and New Right Network. Um, and well, anyway, he keeps trying to tell me I need to be putting in for it, but I was a cross country guy and a track guy, and I got in the Army. I'm like, I'm gonna cut out for running, but uh, oh, there's one of Wicked Wally's dad jokes.
No. Yeah, all you airborne boys, you start 6 feet tall, you come out 5'9". That's the way it works, man.
You must.
That's the way it works.
You must be a super leg, non-airborne Army.
I was in the cavalry.
Oh, jeez.
We did, we did the real work.
Rolling. Jiminy's rolling
Yeah.
coffins, but nobody at Fort Bragg knew how to drive in bad weather at all because it's North Carolina. And I was headed home from should we say a night of festivities, and I was riding with someone, and we went by a really bad accident. And this is how some of the debates on the Crucible strike me because they look like bad accidents for the loser. And I went by and I looked at my buddy and I'm like, someone died. We went by this really bad act. I just like, man, somebody died in that accident. And he's like, that's horrible. Ladies and gentlemen, with some of the debate topics that they have on the Crucible, some of the people get slaughtered. And it's a growing experience for you if you watch it, because you will learn that it is possible to hold somebody out, literally spank them, and walk away and still be friends. Well, I don't know. Are you friends with some of these people afterwards? I don't know.
Some of them.
Some of them, but there is some slaughtering that goes on, and some of the debate opponents can hold their own as well. They do a pretty good job.
Yeah,
And
we look for the best, and we recruit in the best. So I
so
appreciate
once
your
again,
time.
tomorrow night, 8 p.m. or no, 9 p.m. Central,
Eastern.
Eastern. Okay, I think Central time all the time. So 9 p.m. Eastern, and your links are in the description. But if somebody wanted to reach out to you, Twitter is the best place to find you.
Twitter or Discord. I'm at paleo-con on Twitter. You can also hop into our Discord, which is in our link tree, which I believe would be posted on this channel as well.
Absolutely. Yep. Well, Andrew, I appreciate your time, and tell your other half that I'm looking forward to having her on and after the holidays. She specifically said, I'm taking a break for now, but then she's just been a madman on Twitter. So,
Well, I mean, she's taking a break from doing podcasts, but she can cook my dinner and wreck feminists on Twitter at the same time. Okay, she's talented.
she's multi, and she takes care of you, right? I mean, we know,
right.
We know. Well, I appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much for your time.
Yep. Have a great night.
I will let you get back to whatever you were doing, and I'll do a close. Ladies and gentlemen, head over to the Crucible, check them out, and then listen closely. I will try and get the links in the description of the people that he talked to. I'm going to have him send them to me because I will not find them on my own very easily. Once again, if you would be paying special attention to my friends Bob and Sue, they are supporters of the show, and their son Garrett is in desperate need for support as a veteran who has been up until recently abandoned by the VA. I will try and have the Carrying Bridge link in this description here shortly. Head over also to my friend Dana's Give, Send, Go and see if you can help her out. This is a precedent-setting case for the COOF protocols in hospitals. It is an incredibly important fight that she's taking on, and I appreciate it. And once again, to my Subscribe Star friends, to my subscribers here on YouTube, I really appreciate what you guys do. I appreciate the fact that you take time to watch, and a special shout out to my friends at the Art and Sales Group have continued to be supportive. If folks, you are interested, on Wednesday night, I am going to be having on live for Navigating the Northwoods witness to the shenanigans at the Minnesota GOP Central Committee's meeting on Saturday the 3rd, who saw the shenanigans play out, which is exactly why Minnesota continues to lose. And you know what, Snoop, we might even talk about Mort in that situation. So tune in on Saturday night or on Wednesday night at 7:30, and then be looking on Rumble. My friend Dana and I are going to be co-hosting a new series on Rumble exclusively about protocol measures as it relates to the VA and as it relates to private hospitals. So, friends, as always, fight for your liberties. They are yours. Fight for your freedoms. They belong to you. And until next time, sic semper tyrannis.
We are go for liftoff in T-30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.